name's Alexandria Brown, Alexandria, and I'm an author.
All right, excellent. Why don't you tell us first, what is white nationalism and why do you think that it's a problem?
Okay, that's pretty much the topic of our panel. In a way, it's designed, the panel's going to be like a 101 for that topic, but what I would say is white nationalism is not only the belief that white people should organize into racially pure ethno-states, where they're living in countries where there's not any people of color present, but also that the reason that they should do so is because white people as a race are genetically superior to all races.
And until maybe a few years ago, I think that most Americans would think, okay, philosophically or in rare cases, this might be a problem,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not really a huge societal problem. But we're learning more and more that there's a large white nationalist contingent out there that's really serious. And you've had experience with threats in this case.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us about that.
So I recently published a memoir about my experiences being somewhat of friends with the author of the first draft of the Charlottesville Manifesto, former candidate for U.S. Senator named Augustus Sol Invictus. And his ex-fiancée approached me after I stopped speaking to him and told me about really extreme domestic violence allegations against him. She was 19 years old and she had no idea how to handle it, so I offered her a lot of support. And as a result of my supporting role in helping her to go to the police and exposing the allegations to the media, my private information was published on neo-Nazi blogs, and so I received like a sort of campaign of harassment at work and at home, like people threatening me and saying vulgar, racist stuff to me. And I already have PTSD, so it was pretty crazy to deal with. It's kind of started to die down at this point, and I've also developed a thicker skin for it, but yeah, they intentionally organize those kinds of campaigns to silence critics, and unless you really experienced it up close, I think people don't understand how different it is from like a normal conflict that you would have with someone because of the way that white nationalists think about violence and hierarchy, and especially the role of women.
Such as how does violence and hierarchy and the role of women play into the issue of white nationalism in the U.S.?
Well, I mean, normally people who are thinking about ethics are going to say pretty straightforwardly violence is not a good thing. Some people might say it's necessary but to be avoided and things like that. But in white nationalism, violence is philosophically celebrated as a positive part of a good life, and so there's no ethical qualms about it, and it's encouraged. And what was your other question?
And how does that relate to women?
So women are pretty much, that really goes, the issue of women goes to the core of white nationalism, because the way that we populate a white nationalist ethno-state is through breeding as many white people as possible. It's pretty creepy, but so what they want is to confine women completely to the domestic sphere in a way that I would say is much more extreme than even everyday typical American sexism, in order to make them pregnant over and over again, basically for all of their childbearing years. Like Augustus would always say, like, women define themselves in childbirth and men define themselves in war. So there's basically this like violence and the suppression of women are really central to white nationalism. They go hand in hand with each other.
And to draw attention to the issue, you're holding a panel that's called After Charlottesville, Understanding and Addressing White Nationalism. Mm-hmm. You have two other panelists besides yourself. One is an ex-white nationalist,
right,
and the other is a professor. What will these people bring to the discussion?
Well, Dr. Stephen Tauber, he's a professor of global studies at USF, and he's published books on race and ethnicity in American politics. He's going to be talking about white nationalism as it exists in the student body at USF, and because white nationalists will actively recruit to young people, and he's also going to be talking about white nationalism in U.S. government. Mr. Ernest is going to be, the ex-white nationalist, is going to be talking pretty biographically about his own experience being recruited into white nationalism, and then the violence and hatred that reached a breaking point for him that caused him to leave it, and how he now counsels people who are trying to leave the movement themselves, and especially LGBT alt-righters, because there are LGBT people who nonetheless identify with this movement, even though, you know, historically Nazis threw the LGBT community into the camps just as much as they did Jewish people or other people.
Let's talk about terminology. White nationalism, alt-right, Nazis, fascism. How are these interchangeable and how are they distinct?
That's a good question, because it seems like the right has this talking point they like to use against the left these days, that we just indiscriminately use this terminology and call everybody Nazis. And, you know, maybe a couple of years ago, if people were talking about white nationalism the way they are now, that would have been a fair criticism, but people really need to understand that these are actual white nationalists. I mean, I guess fascism as a political philosophy has to do with the relationship that you think should exist between corporate power, state power, kind of like, you know, the sense in which in Nazi Germany was like a welfare state for white people, you know, has to do with like philosophical underpinnings of fascism, whereas white nationalism is specifically emphasizing the racial aspect of that. Like, you can actually be Jewish and be a fascist. You can be a fascist and be of different races or ethnicities, but you can't obviously be a white nationalist without having this identity as a white person.
When and where is this panel?
It's going to be at USF in the Marshall Center, room 3707, on October 3rd at 6 p.m.
USF Tampa campus.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Thanks so much.
Oh, and just, by the way, it's sponsored by the Southern Poverty Law Center. So.
Great. All right. I appreciate you joining me today. Thank you so much.
Thank you.